So make sure you go in and start with the beginning of knowing who you are. Because if you don't believe your CISO material, the rest doesn't work. Get the CV solid, practice the interviewing, research. You should be spending about 2 hours before every interview knowing those numbers, practicing it, researching it. And if they flow off your tongue, my friends, welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. You know what time it is. Boom, boom. Here we go. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. Hope you are doing awesome and you are crushing it. Depending on when you listen to this, we're recording this right about the halfway mark of the year. So there's still plenty of time to get clear, get focused, and get aligned with what you want. Remember, to be a world-class CISO, to live the life of your dreams, requires 3 things. First, are you clear about what you really want? And when I mean clarity, I want details. When I coach folks, a lot of times I go, Eric, I want to be a CISO. Okay, well, what does that mean? They're like, well, I want to be a CISO. I'm like, great. So if in 10 years, you have the title of a CISO working for a small deli where you're making $35K a year and you set up their computers, but you also make sandwiches and make pizza on the side, you'll be happy. They're like, of course not. I'm like, but that fits your definition. You just said you want to be a CISO. So technically what I just described is meeting that definition. And they're like, oh, but Eric, you're pushing the extreme. I'm like, no, I'm acting like the universe. The universe is a magic genie. But here's the thing. It will give you what you want. The problem is, most of the time, what we say is not what we really want. We leave out a lot of details. I kid you not, true story. I had a friend of mine that said he wants to drive around in a Ferrari. That's what he said. Now, what he meant was he wants to own a brand new red Ferrari and have it in his garage. But that's not what he said to the universe. What he said in the universe is he wants to drive around in a Ferrari. And we're talking one day, and this was, many months later, and he's like, Eric, it's so annoying. I'm like, what? He goes, me and my dad go play golf every single Saturday. And he went and bought this old, ratty, beat-up Ferrari. It is like the worst car on the planet, and he loves it because he tells all his friends he drives a Ferrari, and he picks me up in it, but he goes, it is like the worst car ever. And I start laughing. And he's like, why are you laughing? I'm like, your dad should thank you. I'm like, why? The universe granted your wish. What did you tell me that you wanted for the last year? You want to drive around in a Ferrari. What are you doing every Saturday? And he's like, like he almost gets, because he realizes, he goes, I'm driving around in a Ferrari. I'm like, thank the universe. The universe gave you what you wanted. Now, that's not what you intended, but like I said, we often say what we want is different than what we're thinking. So let's go back. Give me more detail. Don't tell me you want to be a CISO, because we can make that happen. You know how we can make that happen? You could go right now, and I bet you can find a family member that if you pay them $500, will let you be the CISO of their house. People have CISOs. Bill Gates has a whole team, a whole staff, right? Really rich people have that, so it's not uncommon. So we can get you that wish right now. If you just want to be a CISO, we can. But that's not what you want, so give me more details. I want to be a CISO of a Fortune 500 company. Great, keep coming. I want to make at least $500K base salary with at least $400K bonuses. Okay, keep coming. Any other specifics, any other details we want to know and be aware of? And write it down and read it every single day. And here's what will happen. You'll initially do a first draft and write it down. And then you'll read it every day. And one of the things I ask you as you read it every day is to go, is this what I really want? And then you go back and say, yes. And what I'm doing is we're instilling the second component which is needed, which is it has to become who you are. It just can't be something you say, I'd like to be a CISO. No, I am a CISO for a Fortune 500 company making $500K base, $400K bonus each year. And is there anything else? Do you want to be home on weekends with your kids? Yes. And I'm available evenings and weekends to spend time with my family. Awesome. And what will happen is over a few weeks, you're going to keep refining it. Going, is this really what I want? Is this really? And if you're pushing back, then there's pieces missing. Or there's pieces you included that are not really aligned. So if you're getting resistance when you're reading this and it's not lighting you up and putting you on fire, then you need to keep refining it. Go, what is missing or what needs to be added? Sorry, those are the same thing. What needs to be removed or what needs to be added? And just keep asking yourself. And what will happen is after a couple days or a couple weeks, you'll be like, yes, this is who I am. And this is what I want. And then present tense, I am a CISO, and you put in present tense. And then you read it throughout the day. Every time you have a free moment, it should take less than a minute to read. So if you're walking between meetings or going to get lunch or driving in the car, or you first get up in the morning or in the shower or any of those things, you're just, I am, boom, I am, boom. And it just, you keep saying it and envisioning it and picturing it till it becomes who you are. Then, what do you need to start doing today to make that a reality? What changes do you need to start making in your routine and how you show up in order for that to be real? And that is a bonus exercise. The real content is, this is a part 2. If you're listening in order, last week I started getting hiring as a CISO. And the first thing, which it's just a different way, is you need to believe that that's who you are. The number one reason, and not only the number one reason, let me push this a little harder. Not only the number one reason, my friends, but the only reason why you currently don't have what you want, the only reason why you're currently not a CISO is because you don't believe you're CISO material. People come to me and they're like, Eric, I've tried everything. I've tried for multiple years to become a CISO, and I don't know if it's just not in the cards or I'm not meant to be, and you're sort of my last hope. And what I realize is, in talking to them with 5 minutes, is you don't believe it. You don't believe you're a CISO. So if you don't believe you're a CISO and you have any doubt in your mind, that doubt is going to leak into the CV, and it's going to leak in to your interview, and of course you're not going to get hired. But if you believe you're a CISO, doesn't matter your experience or what's on paper, you'll have such a conviction and an energy about you that companies will hire you to be their CISO. Remember, CVs do not get you hired. All a CV or a resume does is determine, do we want to start the interview process? Once they determine that you are a worthy candidate to start the interview process, then the CV means nothing. Whether you get hired or not has nothing to do with experience, has nothing to do with CV. It's how you show up. It's how prepared are you, the energy, the conviction, and the focus that you have. And last week, I spent a lot of time on that, so I'm not going to repeat that. So if you're just listening to episodes randomly, go back and listen to last week's episode first, because it's going to get you into the mindset. And where we left off was on the CV piece. So that's where I'm going to take the baton. Your CV should scream CISO. It should scream strategy. And it should have nothing to do with technical, tactics, or security engineer. The number one reason why you don't get an interview is because somebody in HR or recruiting, because with these big jobs, they're often going to screen through multiple phases before you even get to the company, is they're looking for reasons to exclude you. This is what most people don't understand. A CV is not used to see if you're qualified. Level one, when you apply to a job, such as a Chief Information Security Officer, and somebody looks at your CV for the first time, they are not looking at it saying, is this person qualified? They're not looking at it going, oh, they have this skill, this skill, this skill. We must bring them in. They're looking for reasons to exclude you. And I will tell you right now, because so many companies have been burnt with hiring a security engineer that wants to pretend to be a CISO. That is disastrous. Security engineers make amazing security engineers. Security engineers make awful CISOs. Now, you need the security engineer background, but you must do a mindset shift. You must shift from being technical and tactical to being strategic, business, and growth-oriented. Completely different mindsets. So if you're going from a security engineer to a CISO, and it's your first CISO job, total mind shift. You are all about the business. You are all about growing the business. You are all about revenue. You are all about the profitability of the company. Security is secondary. And you have to be willing to recognize that sometimes you have to do things that are in the best interest of the company that might not necessarily be in the best interest of security. This is the ultimate test. If there's a situation where security negatively impacts the business, what do you do? And if people go, well, of course you cancel the project, or of course you don't move forward, or of course you don't do it, congratulations, you're a world-class security engineer. But if you go, oh no, business comes first. We always figure out a way to make it work, but business comes first. Golden rule that every CISO on the planet knows, every CISO lives and dies by this rule, is if cybersecurity negatively impacts the business, it's wrong. It's always wrong. That's the mindset of a CISO. So you need to make sure that you have the right mindset. So your CV cannot have anything technical, because I can guarantee that if this is any reasonable sized company, you are not their first CISO. And most likely, the reason why they're looking for a new CISO is because the current CISO was too technical. They had the title, but they were really just a glorified security engineer, and the business got frustrated. The executives don't have the support they need, and they want a real chief officer. They want a chief officer that secondarily has information security as their focus area. But the outer layers of the title, CISO, CO, the outer layers, chief officer, that's what they're looking for. So I can guarantee that the CEO, COO, CFO have told the recruiters or HR, we do not want a security engineer. Give us a chief officer that also happens to know cybersecurity. So they're looking at your CV going, is this a security engineer? Is this somebody disguised as a security engineer trying to sneak in to the executive ranks and be a disaster? So they're looking for any reason to exclude you. So if you sit there and have technical skills, or your experience is talking about how you implement firewalls, how you go in and design and roll out and properly tune security incident event managers and reduce false positives, anything like that, you're excluded, because that is screaming security engineer. So you need to make sure that your CV has nothing technical or tactical in recent experience. Of course, a job that you had 7 years ago as a security engineer, exactly, because you need to know security. But your recent 2 to 3 years experience has to scream from the mountaintops: strategy, chief, officer, business, revenue, profitability. Now, of course, the question that always comes up is, but Eric, that's not my current job. I don't care what your current job is. You're telling me you've never done that? You have never, ever, ever built a strategy. You've never, ever, ever talked to an executive. You've never, ever, ever worked with vice presidents to help them implement appropriate strategies. Yeah, Eric, but I've only done it once or twice. You've done it. This is the problem. A CV doesn't have to say what you've done 90% of the time. A CV doesn't have to say what you've done 50 times for it to be accurate. If you've done it once, it can go on your CV. So when you're switching career paths, you're switching from a security engineer CV to a CISO CV. My recommendation is start from scratch. Because if you try to take your security engineer and morph it, it's going to still smell like a security engineer. So throw out your security engineer and write a brand new CV. What's the best way of doing it? Is look at other CISO CVs, look at what they're emphasizing, what they're putting on there. Or the exercise I love to do is just imagine you are going into your lab and you are creating the ultimate CISO. You're creating the ultimate CISO. Research it. Look on the internet. Look at skills. Look at the top CISOs. Read articles. Go to presentations. Look at what CISOs do, how they operate, how they think, how they show up. And then I want you to write a CISO CV for the ultimate CISO. Imagination. Totally fictional. But build out this amazing, this is the perfect CISO. Then once you have it, go in and I want you to have a yellow and a pink highlighter. As you go through it, I want you to highlight in yellow skills that you've done. If you've done it once, you've done it. We're focusing on the 5% of your job, not the 95%. So we're not saying you had to brief executives 100 times. If you talk to an executive once, guess what? You briefed an executive, it can go on there, it's the truth. So you're highlighting in yellow everything that is true. Then you're highlighting things in pink that easily could become true in the next month. Like if you had on there, attend a CISO conference or write a blog article on social media on world-class CISO. You could do that. There's so many CISO conferences. You could find one and go to it. You could write a blog article. So those are things that you could easily make true in the next 30 days. Highlight in pink. Then the next 30 days, make the pink yellow. Make all the pink things true. Verify, check, but there you go. You have your CV. That's how you create a world-class CISO CV that screams, I am a CISO. And then you check it. Start applying to every CISO job on the planet. But Eric, I don't want that job. Or it says you must be in New York and I'm not going to relocate. Wait a second. You're telling me that if they offer you a $50 million salary, you won't relocate? If you go to your significant other and say, I just been offered $50 million to take this job, you wouldn't relocate to New York? You probably would. So guess what? Apply. The goal here, just so we're clear, the goal initially is not to necessarily get a job. If you do, great. The job is to vet the CV and get experience with interviewing. So I want you applying to every possible CISO, Director of Cybersecurity, Deputy CISO, any jobs closely related anywhere in the world. I want you applying to them because we need data. If you apply to 2 jobs and you don't get an interview, that could be anomalies, that could be they already had candidates, that there's not enough data there. If you apply to 100 jobs and you only get 5 interviews, I know there's a problem with your CV. That's data. That's actionable data that we can use. So that's the goal initially, is go at least 50. Apply to as many jobs as you possibly can because we want to test the CV. Your CV should be getting at least a 60% hit rate, which means if you apply for 10 jobs, you should get 6 calls. You should be getting at least 6 calls for every 10 jobs, 60% hit rate. If you're not getting that, then there's a problem with the quality of your CV. So now we get the CV. Now, interview. The interview is probably the easiest part because you know what they want. They want a chief officer. They want somebody who's going to go in and talk about the business and talk about revenue and talk about profitability and talk about growth and not get technical. Could maybe talk cybersecurity at a high level strategy, but don't get technical. That's what they want. Guess what? Give it to them. Give it to them. Here's my fail proof. Never failed if you use it correctly. I should charge you a ton of money for this, but I love you, I care about you, I give it to you for free because this is magic. Here's how you ace every single interview. Before you go to the interview, research the company. Find out what their current revenue and profitability is. And currently today with the internet, that's so simple. Publicly traded companies, it's publicly available. Go to SEC Edgar, you can find that information out. Every publicly traded company, they have to give that information out. Private, there's so much research out there. If it's any reasonable size company, if you Google them, they'll tell you the size, the revenue, and all those factors. So you want to know what the current revenue and profitability of the company is and what the percent of growth year over year for the last 3 years were. And then within the first 5 minutes of the interview, you fit that in. So typically an interview starts and they're like, hey, Eric, we want to talk to you about this, or can you tell us more about this, more about that? Answer the question, but pivot. So Eric, I see at your current company, you actually don't have a CISO title. So I'm just curious, do you actually know or understand what a CISO is? Oh, that's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked that I have the opportunity to address that. While I don't have the title, I actually was playing that role for a percent of my job. And what I know is that it's so critical to understand the numbers, to understand the finances of the growth. For example, I know your company is currently at 800 million with a 17% profit margin. And what probably impressed me most about your company is your year-over-year growth. You have over a 19% year-over-year growth in the healthcare industry. And that fascinates me because average healthcare organizations only have about a 12% growth because of all the new regulations in healthcare and all the oversight by by the federal government. So the fact that you've actually exceeded industry average by over 5%, to me, that's very impressive. But I know that if we have proper security and policies in place, we can actually enable the business to grow even faster and quicker. And that's what I've done at my current company, is we were able to leverage security in such a way that instead of inhibiting growth, like many of our competitors, we actually increased our profitability by over 19%, which was 3% over industry average. Now, let me ask you a question. If that is your answer within the first 5 minutes, what is your probability? Actually, let me back up. If that is your response and answer within the first 5 minutes, unless they are my client or they've listened to my podcast, what is the probability that any other candidate is going to give that type of answer? Probably 0. And if you give that answer, just be honest with me. You can tell me that you had goosebumps on your arm when I gave that. It's a pretty impressive answer. Right? Now, the number one thing is make sure your numbers are correct. Don't just make up numbers, right? Because of course they know they're real numbers. But if you go in there and you start with the most calmest demeanor, you're just super chill, and you're like, yeah, and I noticed with your company that you had 857 million, which was a 19% profitability. And once again, very, very impressive, because I know the industry average for healthcare is, they're going to be like, holy F. You know what I mean? Who is this person? We want them now, because this is not how most CISOs talk. This is not how most CISOs behave. This is not how most CISOs operate. So you are going to have to blow them away. And here's the reality of it. And this is true. Almost everybody on the planet forms an opinion of you within the first 5 minutes. The rest of the interview is formality. I will be honest with you. I talk to CEOs and they tell me, Eric, it's so frustrating because they book me 20 minutes because they feel like if the person is flying into town or driving or even jumping on a Zoom call, that you got to give them at least 20 minutes with the exec. But every single exec tells me within 5 minutes, I know whether I'm hiring them or not. And the rest of the interview is just trying to pass time. So they're like, I wish I could just have a 5-minute interview. So you have to blow their socks away. And I will tell you, bringing up numbers, showing that you know the growth, showing that you know their growth compared to industry average. Now, once in a while, you have two things happen. You're going against somebody else who went through my training and gave a similar answer, so you might not get the job for that reason. Second, sometimes with these bigger jobs, they already know who they want to hire, but for formality and HR reasons, they have to interview 20 people or 10 people. So sometimes they already know, no matter what you say, they're not going to hire you. But those are basically, if you focus on the revenue and profitability and show up like I just did, super simple. I know you're like, you probably thought I was going to spend 2 hours on it. 5 minutes. You do that in the first 5 minutes, and except for those two exceptions, your probability of being in the top 3 and potentially getting the job is in the upper percentile. But here's the trick. You have to know the numbers cold. It has to be relaxed tone. You can't have any change. If all of a sudden, yeah, I like working in security, I've done this, and then, oh, and by the way, I know that your revenue is 370 million with 70%. I see some people, they force it because it's not natural. They're going to be like, that doesn't make any sense. It has to be so natural to you. Numbers have to be your friend. Finance, revenue, profit. It just has to flow out of you just now. Like you're just sitting there chilling with a cup of coffee and you just start spewing numbers like it's what you do every day. It's what you love. It's what you eat. It's what you drink. It's what you breathe. And you do that, my friends, and game on. So make sure you go in and start with the beginning of knowing who you are. Because if you don't believe your CISO material, the rest doesn't work. Get the CV solid, Practice the interviewing, research. You should be spending about 2 hours before every interview knowing those numbers, practicing it, researching it. And if they flow off your tongue, my friends, you are going to be a world-class CISO. You are going to crush it. And I'd love to hear from you. When you're doing your interviews, when you're getting feedback, when you get your jobs, when you get multiple job offers, drop me a note below. I'd love to hear from you. And remember, you are the creator of your life, and you can have anything you want.